To lead our first panel discussion, which is on engaging stadia, clubs, facilities and land use managers on events sustainability, I'd like to introduce someone who genuinely needs no introduction, the co-founder and board director of Sports Environment Alliance, head of sustainability at the FIFA Women's World Cup. We welcome Dr. rSheila Nguyen. While Sheila's coming to stage, we welcome our panellists up as well, Sustainability Manager at Stadiums Queensland, Kate Harding. Community Social Responsibility Manager for Netball Victoria, Tanya Gamble. And Senior Projects Coordinator, Libraries, Recreation and Waterways at City of Melbourne, Hannah Martin. I did have Adam right here who's going to help me take this up, but Hugo, you've now got the call up. Instead of the CEO, we're going to move this out of the way so everyone can see our panel here today. Please welcome our first panel.
Is this on? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet and to pay respect to elders, past, present, and other elders from communities elsewhere. It's wonderful, actually, to see, I know Pete said at the top, seeing some really familiar faces, but so many people that we haven't seen. And from Pete's keynote, what I got from it was everyone needs to be involved, and it's great to have your contribution in the way that you can. And I wanted to ask, this is something that I've been holding on in my pocket for the last 2 weeks, just like when you register to come into an office and they print out a sticker, and I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. It's going to stay in my pocket till I die, I think. A TerraCycle is a good idea. Okay, or anyone like that. Yeah, good shout. I think before we get into it, because the topic is around getting everyone involved around major events, and having been involved in a major event recently, it wouldn't have been successful without the help of people like Kate in her role. And so I just want you to maybe I'll invite you to stand up, because we've just sat for 45 minutes. Do you want to just stand up really quickly? And I think the facts that Pete shared with us, it was a bit scary and also confronting. And I know that we face this on a regular basis, but I think let's breathe into something that will enable us to think about each and every one of our roles. So I'm just going to share a quote, but it might be worth even closing your eyes. I won't take your money. Just take a deep breath. No one's going to steal anything from your pocket. I invite you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and I'll just read a quote that gives us kind of a glimpse into what we'll talk about. This is a quote from Phil Jackson, who some of you might know, former NBA Team Lakers coach, and he says, "The strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team." So the strength of the team is each individual member. Take a deep breath. And the strength of each member is the team. All right, welcome you back into the room. Good, you got a stretch, you got a mini meditation. And now we can really focus on our individual contributions. And we're really lucky to have Kate and Tanya and Hannah here, coming from really different places in the ecosystem. And I want to start with a question for you guys about the topic of sustainability. And, we talk about events, and that could be, things that come into your community, things that you're involved in, things that you need to think about as asset stewards, say, for example, stadium stewards. Can you introduce yourselves by telling us a story about how sustainability plays a role in your organization, what it means to you? And then also, because we're talking about events, from your perspective or from your part in that team, how do you see events playing a role contributing to your greater sustainability ambitions? So do you mind if we go this way? All right, go Kate.
Thank you, Sheila. So I guess for me, I am passionate about sustainability. I try and live it. I'm passionate about, for example, what Pete was talking in terms of circular economy, in terms of reducing waste. And so for me, working at Stadiums Queensland, being the sustainability manager there, it is looking at the events and looking at the waste and the impact that we have. We've recently put together and developed an environmental social governance framework, and the organisation has recognised 10 priorities across the organisation. So looking at, for example, energy, water, sustainable resourcing, and materials, which is a massive one, but also inclusion, diversity, Indigenous engagement and participation, health and wellbeing, and obviously governance and things like placemaking as well. So for us as an organisation to really, as you said, work as a team, I'm one individual, but we've got teams across 9 venues across the state. So really working hard to see what we can do to reduce the impact from hosting in big stadia, the events that we have.
Thanks, Kate. I'm going to ask probably a follow-up, but let's go to Tanya. Go ahead.
Okay, that should be on now. Hi, I'm Tanya from Netball Victoria. I'm the Corporate Social Responsibility Manager at Netball Vic. I am also very passionate in this space and area, and at Netball Vic we have, probably about 12 months ago, we started in our corporate social responsibility, including that in a lot of the work that we are actually doing. As an organisation, we set up a green action plan, and we have 7 points that we are focusing on in terms of what can we do as a state body. I think at Netball Victoria, we're involved with hundreds of clubs, associations, leagues, and we're also involved with those affiliates in terms of what we're providing around competitions and activations and things in our, when we're doing events ourselves and also out in our community. But we're also not just in our own home area, we're also in multiple stadiums, on multiple courts out there. So I think we're very passionate about how can we, as a state body, look at how can we provide that leadership to help and support our community out there. So we are looking at what we can do in particular, but then how can we take that, out to clubs and associations, as mentioned. One thing in particular that we are very passionate about at Netball Vic is when we do all those competitions and when we are out there playing the game of netball, we're using balls, every team has uniform. We have, when we're doing our high performance, we've got lots of signage, we've got merchandise, packaging, I could go on and on about the things that we do when we actually hold events. So we're starting to look at taking that responsibility ourselves about what can we do in terms of, the ball recycling and uniform, and how can we get that right, but then take that to the education with our clubs and associations, and I suppose giving them the support and some of the complexities that is in those spaces of when we hold these events and competitions every single week, just like many of you in the room would have other sports, because when you start to think about it, there's a massive, I suppose, material aspects that come out of us playing sport.
Thanks, Tanya. Hannah.
Yeah, so my name's Hannah. I'm working at the City of Melbourne, and I work for our sport and recreation team. So I'm not a sustainability expert by any means, but I'm lucky enough to work for an organisation that takes sustainability really seriously. And we're quite a big organisation, so we've got just under 2,000 staff. We cover a whole lot of different areas, as you know, roads, rates and rubbish. And so we've got teams that are looking at transitioning our council facilities from gas to electric. We've got a urban forestry team that have a huge tree planting program and look at ways of greening the city. City of Melbourne's also responsible for things like Moomba and Melbourne Fashion Week, and I know those teams have managed to have those events as certified as carbon neutral. So we cover a lot of areas. I have nothing to do with any of those things, but just to say that, as I said, I feel lucky to work for an organisation where sustainability is sort of a focus for a lot of different areas. I guess my role today is to talk about our community sport clubs and what's happening out there at a grassroots level, because I know that having been to these summits before, and I come away feeling very inspired about all the things that are done at major events or national and international leagues, but we don't often talk about what's happening every weekend at your local park or set of courts, often just because those people aren't in the room. So that's why I'm here today.
Thanks, Hannah. Thanks for introducing yourselves. And I should have mentioned Ben was as a late apology, but he was just a token male. I'm just kidding. On the panel, no, we love everybody on all the gender spectrum. So, this topic is about engaging at all levels, and the theme of this year's summit is about empowering from grassroots throughout the ecosystem. You're unique. In your introduction, you talk about what you're doing. You have a plan, priorities. You've got a plan in place. You support. There are clubs who are active in this space. What is, coming from your unique places as, Stadiums Queensland, but also as an SSA and a city? What do you think is the unique contribution or the unique contribution that you're making in this work? In maybe just a sentence.
Yeah, so happy to start. And I think from a community sport point of view, when we talk about events, we're really just talking about weekly competition. So that's their bread and butter. It's really their reason for existing. So like I said, it's what's happening every weekend or even every training session. So I thought I would just take this opportunity to highlight a couple of the examples we see through our community sport clubs. And these are really self-driven. They're super simple, but have had quite a big impact. I was going to mention the container deposit scheme, but I know we've got a session on that later this afternoon, but I will just say that's been a real game changer for our clubs because it's a revenue raiser, so they have an ability to fundraise for their clubs. So I know that we like to think of sport as healthy body and healthy mind, but there are a lot of cans that get consumed, so that's a good opportunity for them. A couple of other things, I guess, on that theme, and again, super simple, and it's we saw that a couple of our cricket clubs, and I think it's because there's a lot of overlap with footy in the summer, and there's this thing that happens in football clubs where they have a set of water bottles and it gets shared between the team, and it's someone's job to fill up the water bottles and fill up the big Gatorade container. And the cricket club did realise they weren't doing that, but that they were having to throw away a whole lot more single-use water bottles at the end of the day. And so they just decided, we'll steal the footy club's gear in summer and we'll do that and see how it goes. And something that simple that I don't think it started in footy as a sustainability thing. It was just, it's part of the culture. But just taking that through into the summer competitions, and then we've seen other clubs do the same thing. Again, really simple, but they found that they were having to pick up less rubbish and having to throw away less rubbish, which is obviously a benefit for them. We had one of our clubs implement a carpooling program. So for every car of 4 people, so it had to be 4 club members, not just family of 4, but they would take a selfie of them in their car, the 4 of them, and then they would get 50% off at the canteen that day. So again, it didn't start as a sustainability thing. They are in an area where there's not a whole lot of car parking, and they were getting complaints from neighbours about not enough car places. And so it didn't start out as that, but somebody in the club realised, or someone in the club was able to do some quick sums and work out how much petrol was being saved and how much fuel emissions were being saved. So again, being able to celebrate those really simple, quick things for them, I think had a huge impact. I also know there's there's a group here from Clean Up Australia Day. A lot of our clubs participate in that. It often doubles up as a social event, so they'll run the barbecue. It's a great way for clubs to, maybe a summer and winter club, co-tenants put it on together. So again, at the end of the day, they see how much rubbish they're picking up from their home ground or wherever they play and train, and it's a really sort of tangible reminder of the things they're doing. So I just wanted to share a couple of those examples at grassroots level.
No, I love that, and it reminds me when I was living in LA, and we had the carpool lane, and I'd see cars with like a blow-up doll next to them and stuff. I'm sure that didn't happen. The selfies were all real people, but yeah, I mean, obviously, lots of good stories that you're hearing and collecting. Is that part of the city's? What's the relationship with the clubs and those stories? Are you then taking a next step and sharing that?
And this is the thing. So this is completely club driven. We have. So I'm not here trying to take any of that credit. That is them doing that. And sort of, I think for us, the way that we can enable that is to also celebrate those wins and promote it. So simple things like we've got our email distribution list that goes to all of our sports clubs, so we can highlight those success stories and show how easy it is to make these small changes and what an impact it can have. So when a club sees somebody else doing it, they realise, well, that's not hard. It's not costing us any money to do that, so we can probably do that too.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hannah. Tanya and Kate, some other success stories that you've seen from your respective communities, or even application that didn't go so well but you still learned from? What are some examples?
Yeah, sure. We have, at Netball Victoria, we did a ball exchange program. And so we did it at one of our events, so one of our state title events. So we had a number of, teams coming in and huge representation for that day. So it was promoted and advertised about bringing in basically the balls that you would have thrown away, to bring those in, and then for every 10 balls that they brought in, they received a new ball. So we had the support of our centre. We also had support of game recycling and also RACV for us to do that initiative. And I think some of the things, it was fantastic in the sense of obviously everyone got on board, but it was also just that education. I think doing some of these things is that education for people to stop and think, actually, we could do this. We could actually find a way in our own club, because I think sometimes there's that perception that particularly with volunteers in our clubs and, our affiliate land, that they think, oh, how do we do this? How do we, how people are already putting their time and energy into running the club that's going on. So what can we actually do to try and support doing this ourselves? And so that's actually extended on to us. We're now looking at, so we've recently collected uniform. So we're doing that in terms of our staff uniform that's not used anymore with all our high performance teams. And so we're now looking into a long-term, plan about what are we going to do in terms of moving the balls and the uniform on, but it becoming BAU. Not that we're just doing this once or twice, and which is fantastic, but how can it become, it's business as usual? So if I've got a ball or uniform, I know exactly what I need to then be going to do with it. I think the power of also, as was talking about, the power of social media in terms of putting it out there so people are aware and understanding of what we're doing is something that we have definitely learnt. And I think also the other thing that we've learnt is that message that you need to start somewhere, and that collaboration. Don't always just go out there thinking, oh, we can, how do we do this on our own? Collaborate, work together. You've got a room full of people today, talk, chat. How can we band together and actually make some of these changes? And I think sometimes it's starting small in terms of doing that to create that bigger picture. So that's something that we definitely have learnt also. We recently did a clean-up around our office area, and it was amazing how many bags of rubbish we collected. But once again, from that, then showing that showing our networks in our community that we did that, hopefully that will spark for them to be able to do those things also. And, those little things count to the bigger picture.
I hear you on that. Start somewhere, and it sounded like you did. How did that come about, the actual program and the development and the collaboration of those different partners for the ball recycling program?
Yeah, it was having initial discussions, and I think knowing that sometimes you've got an issue that you want to tackle, and particularly, as I said, for us, it's about balls and uniform and the things we're constantly using every day in our sport. So then, and reaching out to, so you've got the issue you want to tackle, and then it's reaching out to those relevant stakeholders that might be able to support and help you. And in that situation, so RACV was one. It was one of our sponsors, and so we reached out and said, this is something we would like to do, and is there a way you might be able to come on board with us and let's all do this together. So I think it was rather than us just it's having those conversations. It's, bringing local groups together, and instead of just sitting in your own office, having those conversations with your own team, which once again is fantastic, but extending it out. How can you do that with your local areas and having those working groups? We internally have a working group at Netball Victoria, which has been fantastic in the sense of it's got representation across all our departments in our sport, and so by doing that, we're coming together. So it's really reaching out to stakeholders and people. It may not necessarily be new people that, in some cases, it will be, but it might be sponsors, or it might be partnerships you have that you already have in place. Because so often we'll reach out and people will be like, "That's fantastic. We've been thinking about doing something. Let's get together and let's do it together."
I think if you guys are thinking about that wherever you are on things like material challenge, definitely talk to Tanya about how she started that and what it looks like. Because, why reinvent the wheel, right? If you have the model that's successful. Thank you. Okay, what's happening in your world from a success or kind of learning lesson experience?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to, exactly what Tanya and also Hannah have said in terms of collaboration. We have, as I said, we've got 9 venues across the state. We're a pretty lean organisation, and obviously with 2032 on the horizon, we're going to be building and owning 2, possibly 3 more assets. So with the resources that we have, there is a joke in sustainability that it's always a team of 3, me, myself and I. So I rely on my green crew, which is having passionate people at each of those venues who can be on the ground to assist in terms of what projects are available, what initiatives could be in place. Small things like having somebody at the venue who's passionate to say, we've got a small toilet outbuilding, it's an older building and the plumbing's external, so that's an easy win to put some harvesting right to there so we can use it for the flushing, and we're reducing our water. That's a small initiative that's just been in play. In terms of bigger things across the stadia, I think Stadiums Queensland, we're at a benefit where we are like a little petri dish. We've got these enclosed venues where we can put levers in place. We can see what's happening. Data is really important, as Pete was saying. So we've got a lot of things in terms of measuring, installing the smarts. Some really good initiatives that we've done, for example, is working with Tangaroa Blue, and I know that they're here today, at Queensland Country Bank Stadium up in Townsville. So around, obviously, the venues are no smoking, and we always have that cigarette butt litter that sits in those areas where the doses are. We engaged with Tangaroa Blue. We had people on the ground, volunteers, dressed, high visibility. We had infrastructure made of the cigarette butt bins. We had signage and plaques. Over 4 games, we reduced cigarette butt litter by 76%, which I think is a really massive win, given the proximity right next to Ross Creek, which obviously runs out to the barrier reef. So it's working with those networks and collaborating with people like Tangaroa Blue to come up with solutions. Other things that Stadiums Queensland have been doing in terms of, initiatives, and this sustainability and ESG are intrinsically linked, and we need to understand that. So things like inclusion and accessibility, Stadiums Queensland has really been focusing on installing changing places across our venues, because that means that more people who wouldn't come to an event can actually access these big events. Quiet rooms for people who need to have just that silent and looking at the design. So you're not going to put a quiet room at the noisiest place outside a food and beverage bar. You need them to be, and the Sunflower program for hidden disabilities, and training our staff to be aware and recognise these people. Also things like Containers for Change, once again up in Townsville, having those people on the ground, working with COEX, and we've increased our rates up to about 90%. And that money goes towards the charity of the Highest Choice. So there are all these social benefits that come along, and I guess for Stadiums Queensland it's a big responsibility, because we've also got that opportunity. You look here and you've got the big screen there. Challenges, there's a challenge there in terms of we don't actually have access to that screen because it's the high-risk screen for the exclusive event. So we need to work that into agreements. Things like single-use plastics. We're currently doing a materials and packaging audit across our managed venues. working with the caterers, and that's where that collaboration comes in again. You can't do this alone. It's a journey, and you have to take the caterers on that journey and look at their products, what they're bringing into the stadium, both back of house and front of house. And once we've got that complete audit, we can then start working together to look at alternatives. And that's based on, you know, the government's reduction in plastic strategy and things like that, because we want to get it right. We need to look at life cycle analysis of the products that we're bringing in, because we don't want to be using the worst product and, you know, 2 years' time you're finding this out. So, as I said, we've got an opportunity being bigger, and I feel for those smaller organisations and venues, because it is hard, but I think don't reinvent the wheel. You know, I think it was after last year's summit, I was contacted by Venues West because they were developing their sustainability strategy. And I was happy to sit down and just give them the tips, you know, using the SDGs as a framework. What about the circular economy? How do you incorporate that? And, you know, we've said it before, particularly here in these forums, that sport is competitive, but we don't need to compete in things like this, because at the end of the day, we all want to make a big difference. We recognise that I do for the big stadia that we have. It's a massive impact on the environment. And so what do we do to reduce that impact? We need to work with fans, we need to work with our hirers, we need to look at merchandise, you know, what opportunities exist for more sustainable handout items, put a value on it so the fan doesn't want to just throw it away after 2 hours of use. So we're working with that, and it takes time because some of those agreements are for 5 years. So we really have to just engage with those people, take them on the journey, and I would say, you know, a big tip is don't just throw your ESG framework or your sustainability strategy at your facility managers or whomever, or your staff. Hold their hand, you know, explain reasons why. You know, you can point out, we've just found out that if we made the choice of purchasing bins instead of hiring them through one of our contractors, we can save $80,000 a year. So it's taking your facility managers on those journey. You don't want to just, you know, hit them with the stick. And that's across the board with anybody that you engage with. Tell your story, explain why you're doing it, and at the end of the day, you can guarantee that people are passionate and do want to actually do good in the world.
Oh, that's really good, Kate. I mean, you're right. I think what I'm hearing from the three of you here is, you know, experiment. You use these events as an opportunity to just try something, and it doesn't need a large budget, but just to try. And then from there, it really plants the seed for everyone to get around. I think Pete said this earlier about I think it was the City of Sydney just not being accountable, but I think through exercises of accountability, like doing an audit or doing sort of like, what is our challenge we want to solve, it helps you open up those conversations. And the other thing I've learned from your lessons are sort of leaning in. Now, do I get a 5-minute warning here? Is someone going to, because we could go on and on and on and on and on, or Pete, you're giving us the 5-minute? Yeah, thank you. So something I would actually, from their lessons, translate to your conversations today, and feel free to write it down or have a think about it, is what is the problem you want to solve, and then that, or if you have a solution, what problems you can solve in the room. And if you when you have those conversations today at morning tea, at lunch, maybe introduce yourself that way. Hi, I'm like Alcoholics Anonymous. Hi, I'm Pete, and I have this problem, and I need your help. And because, you know, every single one of them have said, you know, lean into the network, and this is an opportunity that the people who care about the same thing are all in the same room, and you're very lucky to have that. I want to ask one last question, and then I'll also wrap up with another quote, and you can stand up so you can stretch a bit as well, and close your eyes as well. I'm sure you're blinded by the light behind me as you're looking up here. Okay, so you've done a lot in your respective places. Events is kind of like a catalyst in some ways, and for Hannah, every day is, you said in our preparation, you know, every day is an event. So there's lots of opportunities to try something new and work with other people. If you were, for this room, because everyone's coming from different places, I'd love to see how many of you are coming from LGAs. Raise your hand. Anyone? Community sport or representing community sport? How about SSAs? Raise your hand. Or state associations, national, raise your hand. Venues, and other solution providers, I guess. Yeah, okay. So there's lots of people here with answers, people. Get in it, okay? There's lots of hands. All right, so because they're coming from different places, maybe some practical, like checklist items from all of the things that you learned from the more difficult, from the more successful things that have happened in your sustainability and events experience. What would those 3 to 5 things on that checklist, from something really simple to maybe something that requires a little bit more thinking or resources, that you would have on your checklist that this audience can lean into? Hannah, you want to start? Looks like.
And I think to Tanya's point, when we're talking about our sports clubs, they're volunteers. And so we have to be really conscious of volunteer fatigue. And we know that volunteerism has declined. I think it's bounced back from COVID, but it's the same story in a lot of places, that there's a small number of people doing most of the work. And so we don't want to create another burden for our volunteers. And so sometimes they'll ask us for advice, whether it's on sustainability or something like inclusion. And our advice is always just, and it's the same as what we're all talking about, is to start somewhere, but just to choose one thing. Okay. So we did have a club who, they had a very passionate person, and they wanted to do everything. So they wanted to reduce, showers. They wanted to reduce paper, like completely go paperless and do everything. And sort of none of it quite worked, just because, again, it's a volunteer organisation. You can only expect people to be doing so much. And with those examples that I gave, they chose one thing to tackle. They were able to have an idea of what was going on beforehand, so how many cars were turning up, or one club who were looking at food waste, so how much food they were throwing away at the end of each week, and then to make that small change and to see the measurable impact that it made, rather than try and do a whole lot of things and maybe not make so much of an impact. Because I think for these volunteers, having something that's tangible is quite exciting, and they're able to share with their club members what they were all able to do as a collective. So our advice, especially for volunteers, is to start small and see how much of an impact you can make on one thing. So was that one thing? Yeah, okay. So well, I love that, because it's so on brand. Do one thing, say one thing. But I think the other part of what you said was so focus on one thing at a time, but also share what you've learned. I think that's the second. And I think also have some form of measurement. Again, it's volunteers. We can't expect them to be collecting a whole lot of data, but having an idea of what the starting point was and then what the point afterwards is to kind of show that success.
Hannah, you got 3. You had 3, actually. So start with one thing, share, and measure. Start like a kind of, when you trying to be healthier or lose weight before and after. Look how successful I was. Good. Thank you. Thanks, Hannah. Okay.
One thing I think is great to share is, and this would probably apply to everyone sitting in the room, is within your organisations or, how you're representing today, is to incorporate these changes in KPIs in positions. And I think it's one thing that I think, like Hannah was saying, you can go out there and want to do a million things and get all excited about it. But if you have this incorporated in KPIs, then it's going to become business as usual. So I think now there's the mistake that can be seen that some of these things, everyone has their role and what they're doing within their organisation. Then sometimes people see these things as extras. If I've got time, if I've got money, we will get to that and we'll do these things that are on this dream list that we have. But I think we need to change that perception, and we need to change that this needs to become business as usual. What are we doing in this space, and what does everyone in this room have responsibly, what's their responsibility around doing that? So I think one thing you can do is start to incorporate that in, in position descriptions with KPIs, so that everyone in the organisation has responsibility. I think the other thing for me is within your organisations is have a working group. This should be a shared responsibility, not just from one particular person or one particular department. It needs to be a shared responsibility in doing that. I think another aspect for me is education. I think so often we don't have, or sometimes people shy away from doing things because they have that lack of education. Sometimes it's perceived that we should know what we should be doing, or where do we want to head, or we want to have a better environment, how do we have sustainability. But sometimes people need to just have that information shared, given, like we're here today. We're here to learn and learn off each other. So I think we need to be doing more of that to be able to move forward as well.
Thank you. Kate, take us away for the last of the tips, tricks.
Thank you. And I guess following on from what you're saying, Tanya, in terms of that recognition, putting it into KPIs or something. So the ES2 framework, which has been developed, we've got group executives across the organisation who are accountable and the lead for those 10 priorities. So whether that's sitting in assets and facilities, which is the area that I sit, it's finance and corporate services, technology services or operations, there's a group executive in the executive leadership team who is accountable and responsible. That's also going to come into play with the mandatory disclosures that are coming on board, where the boards are going to be responsible, and they talk about putting it into KPIs and success measures of raising the importance of it. But the accountability, that's a really big issue. And once you've got those group executives or those whoever's responsible, that's how it filters down through to the organisation. And I guess in our structure, you know, we've got grounds people working on the fields, we've got facility managers, we've got operationals, we've got marketing, we've got comms, we've got technology, a whole range of people within the organisation. But if you can embed your strategy or your framework, it gives all the staff the ability to say, well, I can do this because my chief executive has said that this is a priority for the organisation. So I can go up and I can suggest these ideas. I can look at things in a different way, and I think that that's when it becomes business as usual. Another big thing for us is data. So we've carried out an energy portfolio review across all of our known sites, and that's in order to get a benchmark so we can establish, the tonnes that we're using as a portfolio, because we need that information to feed into our climate action plan. We're doing the same with water. We've just started the water audit, so we need to be looking at harvesting capacities, what's on site, and from that we'll be able to then have a list, and we've done this with the energy, of priorities. And it's about choosing what you can do with the resources and the money that you've got. We get government funding. It's not a hell of a lot. We've got our capital and we've got our maintenance funding. But if we can use that data, as Pete was saying, that's when you've got the evidence to say, here's my benchmark and this is what we want to target. And it's from there that you can see your successes. And I guess at the end of that, which is really important, I think a lot of us forget, is that we need to celebrate those wins when we get them, because it's a big achievement. If you can set a target for reducing, your energy consumption or CO2 emissions or water, that's awesome. But when you get to that target, how about have a bit of a celebration? I think we always forget that. And it's about telling the story of how you got there and taking the wins when you get them. We always joke, we've said it before, that you just got to take that elephant one bite at a time. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kate. I think we should. We need to celebrate more. I feel like there's so many little things along the way that we're doing really well, and we're, overwhelmed by the science that's really scary and can overwhelm our, ability to move forward and flow. But I think you guys gave such great tips, and I'll just add one that, I think you guys have actually said it throughout, is, building the right team around the work that you're doing. As you said, you can't do this by yourself, and finding the unique contributions of those people, and that comes through accountability. But it also, this is this is like fun. Like this is awesome. Like I get to be a great human today. Like you can wake up and be like, this is what I'm doing. Why wouldn't you want to get around it, right? So I think there's a lot there. And maybe ending on just a thought around events, because some events have a very temporary nature, and it makes me think. I said to my dad, "Oh, happy birthday, Dad," and he's like, "Every day's my birthday," and I'm like, "This is true, every day." So every day you've got like this coming up and breaking down. How do you come up the next day about it? But also thinking about the start of the day, the end of the day. Like, what does it look like, and what do you want to look like at the end of the day? And so that measurement piece and, the data frameworks, collection. I'll tell you a side anecdote. One thing that I will say from the Women's World Cup, I wish I had collected data, was the replacement of accreditation plastic. Those things. And I'm like, we there was such a huge transition, but we didn't collect it. And I was like, wish I could. I still sent LinkedIn data, messages to the person who's head of accreditation, like, do you still have that data? And she's ignoring me, but that's okay. She probably doesn't have that data, but that's, important. Okay, Pete's coming up. Everyone stand up. One last quote. Stretch your legs. Close your eyes. Ready? Deep breath. From Desmond Tutu. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. Come back, and a round of applause for these wonderful women doing amazing things.
Thank you, Sheila. Please put your hands together for Sheila, for Kate, Tanya, and Hannah.